So if you want to go ahead and get started, just
Sure.
introduce yourself, what district you're running for and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Jordan Herrera. I'm a disabled veteran. I served our Air Force honorably just under 16 years as a biomedical engineer until PTSD diverted my course for me. But at that time, even though I needed to hang up my uniform to live the life that I wanted to live, I decided that my oath was not going to expire. And so I went to law school. I then brought my law license back to the state of Missouri and started practicing at the Attorney General's office in the Civil Litigation Division, primarily in the field of constitutional law. However, as a lawyer, my actual concentration that I studied in school is around technology and entrepreneurial law. So when it comes to what I'm doing and why I believe I'm the right candidate and why I've stepped up is earlier at the beginning of the Trump administration in the beginning of 2025, I had received notice or word that roughly about 80,000 VA employees were going to be terminated at some point in 2025. In addition to that, every single family care support provider who had been compensated was terminated as well. So we used to have a program in the VA where spouses or children who took care of their dependent VA member could then be compensated for that caregiver role in a way that allowed for them to still be able to provide care. And it saved the VA money because we didn't have to send a nurse or an NP to that person's house. Unfortunately, under this administration, that was another program that was cut. And so that's kind of like what catapulted me into this was I saw what was coming down the line for veteran care in terms of like veteran benefits as well. And then cut to, this over like this excessive federal overreach as it relates to the creation of this now police force called ICE. It's really frustrated the purpose of what Immigration Customs and Enforcement is meant to do as an agency. But furthermore, it's violated the law on numerous fronts. And when I saw these abuses starting to happen in 2025, I spoke up. And in fact, in June of 2025, I was on the World War I Museum here in Kansas City, Missouri, as the only invited Hispanic and Latino speaker and activist. And I gave my part in resistance against ICE. And within 2 days, Andrew Bailey, my then boss, terminated me. I had done nothing wrong other than use my constitutional rights to advocate. And then within 2 days of being terminated, I was back out at Jeff City on the Capitol steps, stating quite clearly, like, even though you think you could fire me to shut me up, you've done nothing but make me louder. And that's what really catapulted my race into the next level. And since then, I've been in 24 counties. I have driven over 30,000 miles in my vehicle. I have met with hundreds or thousands of people at this point, thousands of conversations over the phone. And I've been doing this for 14 months. So I know I'm the most competitive and consistent candidate to run for this office. And when it comes to running against Mr. Alford, I know when we look at policy side by side, one, I actually have it, and I understand the power of a vote and also the consequences of a vote. Mr. Alford has yet to prove that he can do anything. He's had 4 years in office and zero notable achievements other than in the last year he's helped to gut rural healthcare, leading to the possible closure of at least three healthcare facilities so far this year.
Yeah. Uh, so I want to ask, since you're a constitutional lawyer, you mentioned ICE. I know there's going to be some rebuttal when people see this. Give some instances where you've seen it where they have violated the Constitution as far as ICE and how they use them.
Yeah, no, there are numerous instances. So we've seen a detachment from a training standard that makes any relevant sense. So I think we have to start with the training. If your training program lasts 47 days, primarily and solely because the president is the 47th president, we're already at a fail point because we're no longer training people for training purposes. We're training them for symbolic reasons. And I don't need symbology on the streets. I need real law enforcement and people who understand the Constitution. Furthermore, In their training, they've already been advised to ignore constitutional law and norm because they will be given or granted blanket absolute immunity, which does not exist for police forces. It does not exist really even for politicians. But there are some forms of absolute immunity that do exist for politicians when they're speaking on the House floor, for example, or for certain actions that the president can take. But there isn't even absolute immunity for the president or any elected official, rather, because you can always be impeached. So when it comes to this, it really is a separate thing for ICE and for police forces to have not only absolute immunity if you're at the federal level, but also sovereign immunity, qualified immunity as well. There are different levels. And all of these different immunities allow for a gray area to be litigated in. And when we litigate in this gray area, what we're really trying to determine is, does the officer involved or officers involved, are they going to be held personally and civilly liable for the wrongs that they've committed? Now, anybody else who commits a crime, if you assault somebody, not only are you going to be held criminally responsible for the crime that you committed, the assault, but you can also be held civilly liable by the family, meaning you're going to have to pay them damages. And that's essentially what we're arguing here, is that if a cop violates the law, if a law enforcement officer goes too far and doesn't go through the proper process to obtain a valid warrant, that's your Fourth Amendment. So when we're talking about ICE and we're talking about the abuses that we see in the street, when they talk about going and using only an administrative warrant versus a judicial warrant, it's important to understand the differences between the two. And first, we're talking about criminal law here. So they need a judicial warrant. In addition to that, the warrant has to be supported by probable cause. Racially profiling people in the streets today, which is currently authorized under the law, which is crazy to me, that you can racially profile in the streets. That's not enough to give rise to probable cause. Probable cause means that you have a suspicion that something is either afoot, meaning a crime is afoot, or will be happening at some point. And you have to support that probable cause with actual data, information, or knowledge, and support it by an oath, meaning you, the officer, have to sign your name to this and seek a warrant from a judge. That's a judicial warrant under the law. Now, when we see actions taken against Mr. Alex Preddy or Miss Renee Good when they were murdered in the streets, that's your Eighth Amendment. That's cruel and unusual punishment when officers go too far and they use too much force, whether it's at the time of detention, custody, arrest, or otherwise. That is the state's responsibility. And when it comes down to all of this, why we need to have an active, clear stance against what ICE is and what it is not. Now, I firmly believe we need immigration customs enforcement. Yes. Do the actions of this agency under its previous leadership and possibly under its current leadership, do they need to be overhauled? Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. When we hold people accountable and we make the changes necessary to ensure that our law enforcement agencies are still able to operate and still able to keep Americans safe, well, then we do the job the right way. But while I was active duty, this is the best way to put it. While I was active duty, I had a friend tell me this, and he was a chief at the time. He said, "Jordan, you've got to learn to deliver a heavy hit with a soft blow." And that's what I think a lot of this bolstering that we see at the federal level, they don't understand.
So, what would it take for them to get the correct warrant? Like, other than you said, racial profiling, of course, is off the table. I know they're aware of, like, under the Biden administration, that they say that these immigrants, illegal immigrants that were released by the Biden administration, they kind of have a general idea where they're at. Does that constitute for the warrant for them to go
Absolutely
and
not.
no?
No. Probable cause means that you are under the suspicion, supported by some evidence, whether it's visual, verbal, physical evidence, that you believe that there is either a crime happening or a crime is afoot or will occur. But just because some people who may or may not be documented live in an area, that in itself is not a crime. It does not arise to probable cause. First of all, it assumes that an officer might be able to distinguish and tell who's in the country lawfully and who's not. Now, neither you or I can do that. Walking down Main Street in downtown Kansas City, I cannot tell you who is an authorized, naturalized, here born citizen or someone who's an immigrant or someone who's here as a visitor. I
Right.
can't tell you that, right?
Right.
But essentially, that's what we're saying that officers of the law somehow should be able to do, and that's just impossible. So no, just based on where you live alone, because let's flip that around. All right, so I live in Kansas City. I live in downtown Kansas City, and let's assume that downtown Kansas City is our heavily Italian district. And now, in this heavily Italian district, we also have a little bit of Polish people who are trying to move in, and we think that the Polish people are really the ones who are committing crimes. We can't prove it, but there definitely weren't this many crimes, or at least anecdotally, we didn't feel like there were this many crimes beforehand. But now that we see Polish people on the street, we're like, maybe we should get these Polacks out of here. So we're going to create law that says you're allowed to go into Polish portions of the city and move them out, or at least investigate them thoroughly. Does that sound like law enforcement to you? Or does it sound like people being targeted?
Yeah. Sounds like a liquidation.
Exactly. And it's just sort of, when we really look at, why do people come into this country undocumented, then we can really understand the problem. And this is kind of a brief history lesson, but from the 50s to the 80s, the United States was in the business of toppling governments through Central and South America, destabilizing the region such that we would have the dominant hand always. This is nothing new.
Right.
The French have done this in their colonialism. The English did this in theirs. Now, I don't believe America is a colonialist nation or any of that kind of crap. I'm not talking that kind of language. What I am saying, though, is there are secondary and tertiary effects to our global political upheaval processes that we go through. Meaning, if we destabilize nations like Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, that lead to civil war, and then those people flee those said countries seeking safety here, I'm not saying we're the direct cause of it, but I'm also saying we're a contributing cause of it. Yes,
It's definitely a factor.
absolutely. So the question is, how do we resolve this in the most humanitarian way? Because for me, that's the answer. We've seen decades of people coming to our shores, coming to by way of Texas, over rivers, through oceans, and it's not working. So why do we keep doing the same thing over and over and over? Because I remember hearing over and over again when I was little, that if you keep repeating the same things, hoping for a different result, what's it sound like?
It's insanity.
It's insanity. So why are we doing the same troubleshooting to fix this problem at the border? In my perspective, it makes much more sense to do nation building with nations like Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Panama, Argentina, and so on, and right-sized drug interdiction missions through military alliance and support, much in the same way we saw geopolitical stability reached over in the European theater and in the Pacific theater after World War II. When the United States establishes military alliances and does this work of nation building through economic partnerships and global stability, we have great success. Toppling governments, kicking out dictators on a whim, and installing whatever we want next doesn't have a great result.
I don't know how we could afford to fund that if we're sending all of our money over to Israel.
Well, I think right now, when we're talking
Yeah.
about global warfare, right, first of all, we should not be in Iran whatsoever. There
Yeah.
is no imminent threat from Iran. There is no imminent threat from Iran. And here, if there is, I'm happy to correct it. But I come from the state that says, show me. And I enlisted in 2006. I went to Iraq. I went to Afghanistan, and we were told there were weapons of mass destruction. And I can tell you, my friend, they were never there. We never found anything like that there. What we found was a lot of time wasting, a lot of broken families, a lot of broken lives, I look at the war in a very different way today as a grown adult. I came into it when I was 19 years old. I left it when I was 35. And in that period of time, I grew a lot, and my perspective changed a lot. I came into it with this idea of glory and honor and fighting for one's nation. And, I wanted to be Braveheart. I wanted to be freedom and throw my sword. That was my dream. I even went out in the Air Force. I got an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's in U.S. military history, focusing on battle and strategy. That's what I wanted to do. That 30-year Air Force life. I wanted to teach at the Air War College or up in Leavenworth eventually one day. So to like come to terms with where I'm at now, with how I feel about what happened to my service, in those wars. We lost just under 10,000 Americans in those wars. 30,000, though, have taken their lives after they've come home. It's not just sending Missourians or American sons and daughters to go and serve our nation on a foreign shore. It's why are we sending them there? Do we have a mission? Do we have an exit strategy? Do we have a purpose? What I can't do and what I refuse to do is commit another American to die over the presumption of weapons of mass destruction. And I hate to say it, but that's what this president is telling us we have. He's saying Iran has nuclear weapons or nuclear technology such that it can hit Israel or possibly another neighbor. Sounds like a weapon of mass destruction to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to see some evidence.
I don't think some of the intelligence guys they had drop out from the administration, they're kind of contradicting him right now, saying that they don't have them and that it's against the Islamic religion of that country uh, to even have them. That it was more for energy purposes.
Well, I think we've had numerous, decades of reports showing the same thing. Yeah, and now I will agree with some national strategic, more security aligned minded people who, we don't know. Can we trust everything that the Iranians tell us? Probably not. They are a proxy state and have been a long time proxy state of both Russia and China. The question is, though, moving forward, if we wanted to have an Pete Buttigieg, actually, he said something to this. He said it best. He had said, that we can disagree about the treaty that President Obama had with the Iranians. But we cannot disagree about, because it is fact. At the time of the agreement, during this period of time under Obama's treaty or agreements, there were no nuclear weapons. There were no nuclear weapons created. There was no proliferation happening. And now, after Donald Trump has ended those agreements, now we see the sudden uptick of information coming from the Trump administration that, yes, they were actually doing this behind our backs the whole time. I frankly don't believe it, because there were global inspectors for over a decade
Right.
doing this. I just simply don't agree.
Since we're on the topic and you mentioned Obama, I know during the Obama administration, he authorized a series of drone strikes. I want to say thousands, but I don't know the exact number. And then here last year we had Trump ordered the strike on Iran, and then now we have it's pretty much a war in a lot of the public's eyes. As a constitutional lawyer, there are parts in the Constitution about who has the authorization to wage war or to make those kind of strikes, and where does that line draw compared to what the Obama administration was doing, and then what President Trump has ordered.
Yeah, I was actually just looking around. I normally have a constitution on my desk. It must be in a jacket. But so when we look at Article 1 in the United States Constitution, that is the United States legislature, the Congress. That is the people's voice. Every American is found in Article 1. The people always come before the president. So Article 1, I believe it's Section 8, maybe Section 2, Article 2 in there. Don't quote me on this, but I know it's in Article 1. I believe Section 8 is the war powers for Congress. So only Congress can declare war. The president cannot. And only Congress can move and mobilize and fund and provide for our militaries. The executive cannot. Now, what the president does have is found in Article 2, which is the president's powers, Section 2. And in Article 2, Section 2, he has the ability to use his commander in chief powers as a commander in chief if there is an imminent threat, meaning the United States is under an imminent, near time, I mean, soon to occur, imminent threat, then the president is authorized to take action. We want that, right? We want our president to not have to stall or delay or wait on our Congress. What if they're in recess? We don't want delay. We need a president to act. But the president has only 48 hours or 2 days, 2 days to report back to Congress with the evidence necessary to show why he took or she took said action and to seek congressional authorization by the people. Again, Article 1, the people to approve this war or not, because it will be the people who will lead it, the people who will die in it, the people who will fund it, and the people who will bear the consequences if we fail. It's not the president alone. This affects the entire nation. And our founding fathers knew that. They knew that if any president were to lead our country into what could eventually upend our nation, that it shouldn't be a singular or unilateral decision, but one left to the power of the people, not the president.
Trying to think how to. So, does he have to? Let's say there hasn't been any intelligence brought up to support that we are under imminent threat, other than foreign intelligence from a ally that gave it to us, which that's all debatable. Is there a certain time where he has to go to a hearing or his
Absolutely.
administration and prove?
Yeah, so I had mentioned the president has 48 hours to report back to Congress and seek authorization. However, under his war powers, he is given the authorization of up to 60 days. 60 days to commit whatever action necessary to safeguard the United States. And at that point, he can go no further. And the reason why is because it's found in Article 1. The power of the purse. Who funds our armies, our navy, our military is the people. It's Congress. The president is not authorized to unilaterally move money around either. Once it's been allocated, it's been allocated. So that allows for the people to have its priority on where our government needs to lead, not the president. Again, our founding fathers set it up such that we didn't have an autocrat or a dictator or a false king who could make decisions on their own and compel the nation to move forward in that direction. We've also set up a three-part system as a check and balance. Now, I'm going to give you a phrase here. It's constitutional coup. It's my firm belief that under this MAGA movement, which is separate from conservatism and separate from republicanism, MAGA itself is a constitutional coup movement. They have sought through lawful means to take over all three separate branches of government and oust their political rivals, canceling any form of debate or discussion, and instead forcing an agenda. That's what a constitutional coup looks like. It's happened in this country once before. That's how Jim Crow and Dred Scott happened. So it's not a good thing.
So the recent strikes, let's say they
Yeah.
meet all the negotiation agreements, and then let's everything cools off, and we don't administer any more strikes, and we don't put boots on the ground. Does he still have to justify his strikes, and how is that different from the strikes Obama authorized with the drones?
Okay, great question. So let's talk about President Obama versus President Trump in the time frames that we're talking about.
Right.
So President Obama is authorizing drone strikes while we're actively engaged in two wars, congressionally authorized wars, two of them. So he didn't have to ask for drone strike approval. We're at a war already. President Trump is not there. He does not have congressional authorization. He does not have approval to do this stuff. So he has to. And we want that, right? We
Right.
want to be careful with our presidents. We don't want them to drag us into these endless wars, right? So the difference being one, President Obama is also not unilaterally asking for drone strikes by himself. President Obama is not a military guy. He never even purported to be one. He was our commander in chief, and he acted as an executive commander in chief. He was not like a Dwight D. Eisenhower kind of leader. And Donald Trump is far from either an executive or a Dwight D. Eisenhower. It's terrible. It's almost like the way I described it, because I did serve under Trump when I was in Trump one. I was still active duty at the time, and it felt more like a game show. And a lot of people say reality show. It didn't feel like a reality show to me. It felt like a game show of like who got the right answer, who got the wrong answer, and how angry was that going to make our host? Because our host, being Donald Trump at the time, would just lay out all kinds of vitriolic statements and just do awful, terrible things. I remember serving in California, and people were asking me, this is 2017, 2000, yeah, December 2017. And they were asking me at the time, are you deploying to the southern border to keep those Mexicans out? This is in California. And I had said to them, like, what are you talking about? Am I deploying to California? Am I deploying to the southern? You live in California, where the majority of undocumented folks in the agricultural community are. Your state is the sixth largest economy in the world. What are you complaining about? Like,
Yeah.
I don't even understand it. Like, it's just, it's to me, there are some days where I just have to like take a step back and remember these guys don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then it all makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why I asked the questions I did. I understand the gist of it, but it's things I hear on a day-to-day basis with people I work with, or if I'm out at the store. So people are quick to bring up and compare the two with the drone strikes and then the missile strikes over the past 14 days, 3 weeks, or however long it's been going on now. So
Right. And well, I think that's such an interesting thing also, because that's a long held tactic by the Trump movement or the SMAGA movement, which is whataboutism. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? It's always a distractive technique. The whataboutism is, well, Trump did this, but what about Obama? And it's, well, we're not talking about Obama. First of all, Obama had congressional authorization. We were at a time of war with both Iraq and in Afghanistan. And if you don't understand that, then you already missed the plot. Like, we got to go back to public school and teach people basic history. And not even that long ago, from 2001 to current. That's
yeah,
it. And if they don't understand that, then we got a problem. Now with President Trump, where he's at, and committing these drone strikes, and they were not drone strikes; these were manned vehicles that were manned aerial vehicles that were shot down, and some like, massive payloads have been dropped over in Iran.
right,
Um, I think the other thing here, though, as I just said, that was if you look at what's happening in Iran right now, there's a lot of chaos and confusion, a lot of extreme costs also. Uh, what I mean by that is we've had three F-15s that were shot down by friendly fire. Another F-15 was shot down over the nation of Iran. Where both pilots, thank God, were both recovered. But one pilot was damn near a POW, could have been found. It took almost a day for our forces to get mobilized in there to try and do these rescue and recovery missions. So what I'm getting at with this is you don't see aircraft being shot out of the sky by friendly fire. You don't see the concealment of 150 American wounded people. You don't see the concealment or the tampering down. Why don't we know about these 7 Americans who gave their lives? We heard about the
right,
first 6, but then they stopped reporting.
yeah.
We cannot allow this to happen. Why I'm saying all of this when it relates to President Trump is there was no imminent threat. And at best, what we can get out of this is the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened. Reopened. It was open before we even did any of this stuff.
Yeah.
We are not going to get anything out of this deal. I just don't see how we can.
That's that that's a lot of frustration I hear right now is the prices have already gone up because of the tariffs. At least that's what we've been told, and then inflation. And then there's a housing crisis. Our generation, we struggle to find a place to live. We don't want to have children because we can't afford them. But then we look and we see what's going on over in Iran, and we're like, and we see the amount of money being wasted and our aircraft being destroyed that costs billions of dollars. And it's very frustrating and it's disheartening for everybody.
Very, very disheartening. And I'm so glad you brought that up. Young families today are at such a disadvantage. And I hear crazy JD Vance talking about how he wants all these women to have babies in this country. You don't have a nation, though, that supports life. And what I mean by that, you'll hear this often about the pro life and pro choice debate. I really don't like the terms pro life and pro choice. I don't feel like they accurately describe us as Americans. I think there are two camps. They are pro birth. We support life. A support life Democrat makes sure that a woman always has the right to decide. That is a sacred discussion, a confidential conversation between a patient and their provider. Forever and always, that has to be on the table because it's individual freedom and liberty. And just because I don't agree with it, and as a Catholic, I can have my own opinions on things, but as a Catholic, I'm going to encourage life. That's why I wear this stuff. This is my grandmother's crucifix. That's why I call myself a Catholic because I want people to choose the way of my Lord and Savior. Not that they have to choose my Lord and Savior. But there's anyway. My point in saying this is, as support life Democrat, make sure that a young single mother or a young family that wants to have a young family that wants to have a new baby, they go into that delivery room and they leave just as wealthy as when they went in. They do not leave with bankruptcy or debt. That is what I believe. We need to be fixing our healthcare system so young people have the financial ability to have children. It starts in prenatal care. It
Yes.
starts with uh, the delivery room. It starts with making sure that young parents have all of the support necessary to even understand how to raise a family.
Right.
It's one thing to tell people you must have children, and we're going to limit, the amount of abortions we do in this country. Which, by the way, statistics just came out. There were the same number of abortions performed in 2025 as there were in 2024, which shows you directly you cannot legislate away free choice. You cannot do that. And no matter how many restrictions you put on the subject, whatever you're doing, restricting the procedure is not the problem. People will continue to go out and find a way to have a procedure to make sure they can live a qualified and dignified life. What I'm getting at is that under a Medicare for all or a public insurance option, which is what I advocate for as an interim vehicle to get there, is that when we make sure that we actually talk about families, and we put families first, meaning your healthcare is non-negotiable. It's an infrastructural need to your quality American life. When we talk about housing and fixing broken housing systems, I don't need to build 400, $500,000 homes or even $300,000 homes. I need 100 to $150,000 homes, workforce housing for young families that they can actually get into, fix up on their own over time, make it their own, and continue to grow and develop. I need a public health or a public education system that allows for all students to receive equal, fair, thorough education. And I need a higher education system that doesn't have predatory interest attached to it. And I talk about attaching a usury cap on student loan products to go after that interest itself. So everything I'm talking about right now, the housing, the healthcare, the education, making sure that we go after monopolies in your grocery store.
Yes.
All of that is what being a support life Democrat is, because we are making sure you can have a qualified, dignified life as an American.
Yeah.
That
Missouri.
side can't say the same.
Missouri,
Go.
they're kind of open with the whole usury thing. You look at these payday loans and title loan places. It's a vicious cycle. I see it on a daily basis with my friends, family. You get in a tight spot and you need money, and then they're charging over 100% interest on something. You cannot get out of that.
You cannot get out of it. It's predatory as hell. And frankly, in a state like ours, With what has happened under our state government over the last 22 years, I've seen how it's changed our state. I've lived here since 2011, and I've seen how our state has changed since then. I mean, it's just it's we've lost millions and millions of dollars in our infrastructure. Our public school system is at a deficit already of $300 million annually, which, by the way, it's funded 40% by the federal government. That's scary.
Yes.
And when we say fully funded in our state, we only mean at 28% of the required amount. That's fully funded, 28%. And we still cannot get that far. So when we talk about, like uh, 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 this world we're living in today, these economic challenges, I've just had to really take a lot of time, and why I've been running for 14 months, it takes a lot of time to have these conversations. But to really slow down with folks and say, okay, well, if you really think republicanism is good, let's take a look at it. Let's critically look at it. Let's piece it apart. And if you think Obama is bad, I'm not going to disagree with you. But what I am going to say is maybe there's a better way for both of us. I that's been my tactic. It's been really, really helpful. Also, I also don't lead with my party.
Right.
Here in the state of Missouri, it's kind of harder to do that as a Democrat when you lead with your party first. I start out with, I'm a disabled veteran. I serve my nation, and I'm a constitutional lawyer. And I remind folks often that I started out with a GED. I did not come from money or wealth. I still don't have money or wealth, um, but I'm a good person. And I wake up every day hoping to do my best and have a better day than yesterday, like hundreds of millions of Americans. And just like those same hundreds of millions of Americans, I have dreams that I want to achieve. I want to have family. I want to make sure my children are going to grow up and not be invaded by a Persian nation that we stoked a war with for no reason.
Right. So, I always thought it would be cool, which I don't know the financial aspect of it, if it's ever possible, but newborns, and then let's say all the way up to the age of 18, you get free health care in the United States. And then if you become pregnant or you're a pregnant mother, you receive free health care while you're pregnant. And then it lasts into a certain area in the postpartum afterwards to kind of help encourage and level that out. Uh,
Yeah.
but we see it in Missouri. I want to say it's across the nation, but I know Missouri is really bad with health care and insurance. So, do you have any ideas or plans to help hold insurance accountable and healthcare accountable? I know there was an executive order, which I did appreciate about hospitals have to show you the prices up front, but it's not really being enforced. So you're still getting kind of surprise billing in a way.
Yeah. No, I think there's so much that can be made better in our healthcare environment. So I'm going to come at it from a different approach. I was a biomedical engineer for the Air Force for 16 years or just under it. So what a biomedical engineer does is I make sure that all the healthcare instrumentation in that facility is going to save your life, keep you alive, give us accurate results. And it could be anything from a thermometer to a dental chair to a defibrillator or an MRI and CT machine, any of those things in between. It's a difficult job, but when it comes to, I don't want to, I'm so sorry. Do you mind rephrasing the question again? I kind of lost it a bit.
So I've referenced the how we still kind of get surprise billing, even though there was an
Surprise
executive
billing.
order.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Yes. So when we come, oh, thank you. Sorry.
No, no
I wanted
problem.
to mention, like, when it comes to healthcare costs, right? So why I started out with being a biomed. A lot of your healthcare instrumentation has a markup on it. There's a premium on it because it's a healthcare device, and it's got to go through certain testing and things like that. But the same electrodes that you're buying that you would use for anything else are going to have, roughly 100 to 200% markup just simply because it's used in healthcare environments. The same is true for every consumable item you can imagine. The band-aids you get in your first aid kit on the street are the exact same band-aids you're going to get in the hospital. But in the hospital, we're going to pay a premium on them. And it's just because it's going into a healthcare environment. So when we talk about the truth in pricing as it relates to the care you receive, We have to look at it from a holistic approach. One, the healthcare instrumentation itself is run by very few companies. There's almost a monopoly in your healthcare in terms of the equipment inside. And what that means is, yeah, a lot of money for the same technology we've had for the last several decades. That's problem number one. Number two, you have a lot of people who are underinsured and cannot pay their bills. And so what that means is that those who have adequate or more insurance than they need, they often get in like they get billed more to make up the difference. And so the person
Communism.
who, what's that now?
That sounds like communism.
Oh man, it's a racket. I mean,
But
like
yeah, I'm
I
sorry. Go
I
ahead.
I understand why healthcare practices do it, but at the same time, if everything is too expensive in our healthcare system and we are paying 3,000 to 5,000% markups in comparison to Canada or Mexico, and they have the exact same pharmaceutical labs as we do, and it's the
Yes.
same drug that we are getting, yeah, Americans are pissed. I think we all are fed up with the healthcare landscape in this country. And I'm kind of tired with the Republican Party continually telling me I want a private insurer of my choice. Well, I know what that means now. You know, it means that your private healthcare coverage is going to deny pre existing issues or conditions. They're going to cut claims when you go into the healthcare facility and say the facility's in network, but that provider is not, and all this other horseshit that just it drives up the cost of price of healthcare. It drives up the price of missed appointments and all of that other stuff. It all factors in. And now let's go over to pharmaceuticals. There's actually a law on the books already under patent law. It's called the Baudot Act. And underneath that act, it says under federal universities, if you receive federal dollars, anything that you use in terms of research and development that comes out and it's a product, say a pharmaceutical, well, the shareholder, the American taxpayer, operates as a shareholder and gets to have a say in the commodity price. Well, that's basically the same thing that we have right now with our pharmaceutical industry, which are all heavily subsidized by the taxpayer. It's my firm belief that if we've been funding the research and development that keeps pharmaceutical companies wealthy in the hundreds of billions of dollars of profit per year, then yeah, our American taxpayer should be treated as a shareholder and get a determining say in how much the price of the goods are.
Right.
That could be for pills, that could be for injectables, that could be for consumables, those types of things. I would also argue that when the federal government eventually does create a Medicare for all option, a plan for everyone that is going to be low cost or free to enter, the way that works and why it will work is because when the federal government becomes the largest employer of healthcare providers, the largest employer of nurses in the country, which I'm sure they probably already are. But when they do that across the nation, we will get to drop our prices so far. It'll all be easier to manage, easier to regulate. And although there may be naysayers who say there's going to be longer lines and that sort of thing, well, look at your rural healthcare as it is. It's closing anyway.
Right.
We've seen what happens under the Republican Party, and it's led to hospital closures and healthcare deserts. I'm ready to try something new, and I'm done with listening to the witch hunt kind of like crap that they push us out with.
Yeah, we've had that issue here in Cooper County. We are the hospital closed down,
Yeah.
and now you're lucky if the ambulance isn't out doing a medical out count, to see them in under 15 minutes. So if you're having a stroke or a heart attack, 15 minutes ain't gonna cut it.
You know, it's so important to know those timelines too. I actually had the opportunity to confront Congressman Alford at Cass County Veterans Coalition. He had voted to gut Medicaid while protecting the Epstein files. He's gutting Medicaid, devastating our rural healthcare infrastructure. And I go up to him and I ask him, okay, you took this vote, you gutted Medicaid, knowing that it was going to put our healthcare in jeopardy. Bothwell is now at risk of closure. That is the hospital that our active duty guardsmen and reservists at Whiteman Air Force Base utilize. If that closes, the nearest hospital will either be Kansas City or Columbia, depending on where they're at, Sedalia or Warrensburg.
Right.
And the problem is, and you made a great point, if you're in an emergency, say you're a young military family and your wife is pregnant and you're serving over in Iran, you want to make sure that your wife can get to a healthcare facility like that, that your baby's going to be fine because we need your mindset trained on the fight. And the fact that Mark Alford can't seem to understand that his votes have consequences. So when he guts Bothwell or guts Medicaid, closes Bothwell, now I have to think about all of these military families who are in jeopardy. All of those soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines are going to be serving overseas who do not have adequate health care back home. And what if their kids have a temperature and they're sick with the flu, or their wife is pregnant, or their husband goes into kidney failure? Any number of things could happen.
Yeah.
And when I asked Mark Alford about it, he didn't have an answer for me. I'll be honest with you. He didn't have an answer. But a few minutes later, he comes over and he's got a phone in his hand from his intern. And he says, Jordan, my intern just handed me my phone. And he says, I actually got Bothwell $750,000 for a research lab. And you can look it up. He got that appropriation. It's 750 grand for a research lab at Bothwell. I asked him one more question. I said, that sounds great. Thank you for doing that. But what good is a research lab if the hospital's closed? You're laughing. Everyone else laughed around me. His eyes just deer in headlights. Like, I didn't even think about that. And you could tell.
Yeah.
It's just it's scary.
Yeah. Another thing I want to bring up, frustration, and I've experienced it. And I know a lot of my family have experienced it. Is the insurance, how they have the right to deny certain treatments or medications. I get the argument generic and name brand, which I think all that's BS is BS anyway, but it is frustrating whenever you have a loved one who has severe asthma and you have to have a specific type of inhaler because the steroid targets that specific part of the lung and whatnot. But,
Right.
and then the insurance denies it. They say, well, we don't think you need that. Like, how is that not a malpractice?
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful question. To be honest, I'm gonna look that up. Honestly, malpractice as it relates to insurance, and how we could bring those claims. Because currently, under the current infrastructure, you can't. Because the insurance company does not practice medicine.
Right.
They can only tell you what they will pay for. Now it's up to the doctor to practice medicine. However, to your point, if the insurance company is telling you what medications and what treatments they will provide, what they will not provide, they're kind of dictating care.
Yeah.
And when they dictate care, yeah, they may say to the patient, well, you're welcome to pay for this other thing, but it'll be out of pocket.
Yeah. And
They
that's
also, I think, sorry, go ahead.
that's actually my personal situation is I went up to get a prescribed medication for a loved one, and when I didn't know until I had was at the counter, and they said the price is going to be like 400 something dollars for this inhaler, and I'm like, what the hell? So I called
Yeah.
them up, and they're like, oh no, you have a generic, but the doctor didn't want to prescribe that generic because of the There was a difference in the steroid, I guess.
Yeah.
It was a headache, and then I ended up having to pay that out of pocket for the time being, and still hasn't been resolved.
I apologize. My mother is in a very similar situation. She's a diabetic. There are millions of diabetics who are in a similar situation where if they pay out of pocket for the diabetes medication that they need, it's anywhere from 125 to $250 a month. That's out of pocket costs. Now, with certain insurance and coupons and things like that, and under President Biden, there was supposed to be a maximum of $35 maximum per diabetic uh, purchase or for your month of medication. Um, and there was a rebate program right for that. Not the best solution, I will admit. But when it comes to that, where insurance companies are denying medication and they're instead sort of like forcing you into a different treatment plan, I do feel though that our insurance companies do need to be held responsible for any kind of loss of mobility or ability or life expectancy, much in the same way that healthcare workers, like a doctor, would be sued under a malpractice lawsuit. I think that's a very, very astute observation, and frankly, one I haven't heard before. So that's why I wanted to make sure I wrote
Oh,
it down.
okay. Uh, And then no, something I want to bring up too. I know APAC's one of the hot topic items. It's really hated, but also I
Yeah.
think a lot of the super PACs are overlooked. And there's great concern in Missouri with data centers. I can't remember the town, so I'm sorry I can't remember it. But I guess the whole where that half of the city council was just ousted in this past municipal election. People did
Oh,
not want the data centers, and the council voted it anyway, so they all got the boot.
yeah. So, I was that in Independence, Missouri?
I would love to say that's where it was at because that was one
Okay.
of the bigger slap in the face.
Yeah, yeah, because that's kind of what happened there was the city of Independence did not want this to happen. Overwhelmingly, they showed up with petitions. I think over 5,000 signatures on the petition. They showed up to several meetings. They hosted several town halls, and city council officials did not listen to them at all. They just disregarded it, moved forward with the data center, and it's a really great question. So I'm a technology lawyer, so this is kind of like fun for me a little bit, but it's also this is where politics meets technology. Okay. So the situation is this: among our union friends, sheet metal workers, pipe fitters, welders, electricians, they're hungry for work, right? They need work. And so with data center development, building, everything else, that's going to provide solid labor jobs and union jobs for the next, we'll say, decade to decade and a half, 15 years worth of work. That's a lot of work. And we're in the state of Missouri. We have four tech billionaires who live in our state. I don't think a lot of people know that, or that Sam Altman lives in our state. We are not getting away from data centers, Missouri. It's not going to happen. So we better find a way to like make it work and coexist. Now, how do we do that? Because I know personally, I know the two main causes of homelessness today are housing costs, number one, and healthcare costs, number two. So we cannot kick anyone else out of their homes. So with the building and the introduction of data centers into municipalities and cities and such, we cannot have our utility bills be impacted such that it puts people into homelessness or it makes more families question the decision, do I pay for my medication this month or the light bill? Do I pay for food for our kids or do we have heat this winter? Those types of questions should not be asked. And currently in our system in Missouri, we do have a very, I believe, corrupt system where we are paying basically the overhead costs for energy providers in our state. That should not be happening out of our dollars. Um, so when it comes to AI data centers, I would advocate that we need to find a way to still build because not all data centers are bad. They help us to make our world more efficient and better. Um, we need to find ways, though, that don't encourage pollution, um, ways that don't put more heavy metals into our groundwater or pollute our streams and rivers. What we can't do is put more people into homelessness, like I've mentioned. So I think there is a lot to negotiate and discover with AI and data centers in general. I think right now we're probably moving too fast. I would caution a little bit of a slowdown, just so that way we can engineer these facilities better, we can design them smarter. Um, I don't think going rapid right now is the answer.
Uh,
Yeah.
just to support what you had said a few minutes ago about the corruption. So Ameren here in Missouri, they are one of the number one PAC donations in Jefferson City, and they just made a deal with several AI data companies and said that they would only have to pay 80 to 90% of their utility bill. So who's gonna front the other 10%?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be subsidized by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's and Mike, I'm curious too with how much of these data centers is it really the boogeyman or is you have propaganda going against them? Like how much do you know kind of the specs on the resources? I'm not really familiar with it
It
because
just depends on the size of the data center. So Missouri and Georgia are two states in particular that have a lot of data center growth right now, Georgia being the largest. And if we look at the Georgia footprint and what's going on over there, the environmental conditions are certainly a problem. Um, What we also know is these are not bringing new jobs. I mentioned that they are going to provide labor and construction jobs. That is true. But those are temporary. They're not permanent and long lasting. Even if they do last 10 to 15 years of building throughout the state, they are not permanent and long lasting.
Kind of like
And at,
pipeline work.
yeah. And then at a data center, you're not going to have thousands of employees. You're going to have maybe a couple dozen. So at best, these are not going to bring in very many jobs. Uh, in terms of revenue, does a data center make money? Sometimes yes. It depends if they're Bitcoin miners and those types of things. What's happening in that data center. There are numerous ways to profit off of a data center for sure. But it could also just be a repository. It could also just be where you're paying for server storage. It could also be a relay. For example, all throughout the United States, there are plenty of data centers that are already constructed and built to just relay data, and they just store ones and zeros so they can be recharged and sent down the line. If that makes sense. Like in
Yeah.
our Air Force, and well, you see that in a lot in our healthcare infrastructure where you'll have redundant systems that move medical records around. And they do that in particular because you don't want a loss of health records, number one. But two, it's expensive to power all of these data centers and systems. So by moving things around a little bit and having redundant files, it saves money. Um, but I would say overall, inside a data center, if they're not harming our environment and they're causing more homelessness, these are things that we should be rallying against. Um, until those issues are resolved, I would say that data center construction should be kind of slowed to I don't want to say to a halt, but it should be slowed
Right.
for sure.
So I want to touch back on the housing crisis a little bit. Is there any regulation as far as like these corporations, BlackRock? I know they're one of the primaries
Yeah,
where they buy these single family homes, where young couples who want to start a
is
family, they don't have that option.
monopoly and antitrust law.
Yeah. Is there any program that the state
Yeah.
that would
So
be
no,
making?
that's
Oh, go ahead.
no, no, no. I think your question was kind of going to, are there any programs within the state or maybe the federal government that we
Yes. Yeah.
could look to sort of curtail this purchasing? And the answer is yes, but it also depends on how we look at it. So there's monopoly and antitrust law that says that you cannot buy up greater than a 30% market share of the private market. And if you do, at that point, you're kind of towing the line on price gouging, price setting, market manipulation, those types of things. And you would have different requirements to collect different evidence through discovery for each one of those types of claims. But essentially, that's the gist of it. If you think of monopoly as you have to own a certain percentage, and currently under a Sherman and Clayton Act, I'm pretty sure it is 30% minimum to 40% minimum. For me, frankly, that's too much. I think we need to drop that down to around 10% private equity in the housing industry within a municipality.
Right.
I think the other thing that we can do there, which is what I would also advocate for, and not just housing, but also technology, farming and agriculture, in our grocery markets and in our school systems, that we would break up vertical integration. And what I mean by that is you can't just own all the properties everywhere. You can either buy mortgage properties or you can buy short-term rentals, but not both. You can have all of the mortgage properties or some rental properties, but not any short-term rentals. Things like that. That's how you can break up the market in a way that encourages greater competition. And when you have greater competition in a specific market, each business is attempting to compete through price, through different amenities, through different whatever. That's how you bring prices down.
Yeah, that's it's been a hot topic for people my age. I hear it all the time that it would be the dream for it to be outlawed for these corporations to buy single family homes where the only market they could partake in are like duplexes, apartments, something that's obviously you can't really have a family there, you know,
Yeah.
and then leave everything else for uh people who want
So
to own their own homes.
well, I think that's a really smart idea. And honestly, like when it comes to my housing strategy, that's just one piece of my plan. The greater part of my housing plan starts first with advocating for a national housing emergency. When we do that, the federal government can drop the price of building materials to rock bottom prices, encouraging a building boom across the nation because we currently have anywhere between 4 or 7 million homes deficit in this country, depending on the survey you're looking at. So to build our way out of this, it's going to take a lot of investment and time. And frankly, we're not going to build our way out of this overnight. We can't build 4 million units in a year. There's just no way. So
Right.
what do we do? We have to be smart. So after our national emergency over the housing, and we're starting to build, we need to keep that going. You've probably heard of Section 8 housing or something like that. Well, the proper name for it is low income housing tax credits. That's the program that provides Section 8 housing. Low income housing tax credits, or LIHTC. What I'm also advocating for is the creation of MITEC, or middle income housing tax credits, for builders and investors to build workforce housing at 100 to $150,000 range that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Single family unit housing in that range. Uh, that's part two, is MITEC. Part three is we have to also focus on rent. We have to look at rents across the country. And frankly, for me, in our state of Missouri, where we've seen rent go up 20% in 3 years, it's hard. People are locked into their lease agreements now more than ever before. They can't move. There's no portability because folks cannot afford 3 times the rent of anywhere new. The rents have gone up so much.
Right.
Last, when we talk about fixing our housing industry, right, we also have to talk about all of the dilapidated, defunct, and abandoned buildings across our country, in particular in our state. You'll see it all through Kansas City and St. Louis. I look at those facilities and I also look at people's attics, garages, and basements and say, if you want to apply for a micro grant that will help start that renovation or rebuild, I believe you should be able to apply for that. I believe we should give you that money as a homeowner, a $25,000 micro grant or loan, excuse me, loan to create that new habitable apartment for you out of your basement, out of your attic, or out of your garage. And what that has done is we've turned the homeowner into an entrepreneur. Now, with all of these programs I talk about in my housing focus, I also encourage a rent controlled agreement with everything because we don't want the market to go out of control.
Right.
I also talk about capping rent year over year at 5 or 3%, like California and Oregon do. I think that is something we can do across the country that attacks that 20% growth in rent cost, lease over lease. So when we look at housing, I look at it in those ways of not only going after hedge funds and investors, but also making sure that we address the national emergency itself head on, that we create a program called MyTech to make sure it's long lasting and sustainable, that we convert the homeowner into an entrepreneur because we need 4 to 7 million units and we're not going to build our way out of this overnight. And we
Right.
also cap rent to make sure that we don't create a bigger problem. We stabilize the system and we keep it moving forward.
Uh, my question is, how come we haven't ever really revamped the Homestead Act and just refurbished it to fit today's time? You see in like these urban areas and even here in rural areas in these small towns, you have all these vacant lots owned by local government or even state and federal government. Why can't they create contracts as far as if you want to build a house here, if you're showing improvement, they'd have to update it compared to, 50, 100 years ago. But saying if you're willing to improve this vacant lot and create a home and put a home there, you could have this piece of land.
Right. Well, I think that's a really great question. And frankly, under the Homestead Act, the way it was initially written, obviously, was for westward expansion and to go into those uncharted places in America and settle them, create more civilized spaces, I suppose, was the idea. My grandmother, she got her house under the Homestead Act way back in the 1960s in Nebraska. That's where I'm originally from. So I've seen it used in those areas. Now, I think you're bringing up a really great question of can we take existing law and renew it in a way that makes more sense for today? And I think that's absolutely what we have to do today. I call myself a constitutional modernist or a government modernist, meaning we need to modernize our institutions. They're too far in the history books, I think. For example, in our Constitution, we don't even talk about digital privacy whatsoever. That's a problem. We need to have that in our Constitution, especially moving forward, the way technology is integrated into our lives from even preschool through the rest of your life now.
Yeah. All right. Last question I have, then I'll let you get off. I know you've had a long day. As a constitutional
Well, this is
lawyer,
great.
I've seen a lot of conspiracies about the income tax, how it was originally when the nation was founded, we didn't have it, and then it was first implemented during the Civil War to help fund the war. Then it was deemed unconstitutional, but then it returned back, and it's been here ever since. What's your take on that?
Every nation needs to fund itself. If we are at a place now where our government has how do I put this? It's my belief that in America today, the American dream has been bought and sold before many of us have even had the chance to walk across the grass. That's the reality. I don't believe in this whole idea of, we're going to all rise together. I haven't seen it. What I have seen is this idea of trickle down economics was also wrongly labeled. It was never a trickle down benefit, it was always a trickle down burden. And that's where we're at today. The burden has been moved to the labor and the working class. And those who already have too much are gaining more and have working less. And I don't know where we got to in this country where we rewarded greed, where we celebrated greed. Even under Rockefeller and Carnegie, when they were making this nation, they had limits. Today, it feels like there are no limits. I mean, we have a president who's made billions of dollars off of the office he holds. It's crazy. I mean, I never thought we would be in such an unconstitutional time. When it comes to this income tax, look, every American has a duty and a responsibility to make sure our country thrives. That is my firm belief. We all have a citizen's duty. Now, some people may disagree on, I don't want to take my kids to public school. Well, then take them to private school. But that's a personal choice. As a community, as a society, we decided that we were going to educate our people. We're going to educate our citizens. And we're going to educate them because it was good for society, not good for your religion, not good for your issue advocacy or your one area of charter school that you care about, but good for society. And I think when we're looking at income tax and do we need it or not, we have to ask, well, what kind of society, what kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a world where I know at least the wealthiest among us are forced to pay and will be held criminally responsible when they don't? Because they are. If you need examples, look at Bernie Madoff. Until Trump pardoned him, he was in prison. We hold people accountable who steal money. We hold people accountable who don't pay their taxes. That's how Al Capone got thrown into prison. Come on, we need people to pay their taxes. That's how every society works, from Rome to present. Now, how much do we pay and where does it come from? That's the debate. Today, I see labor and working class people, farmers, teachers, nurses, gas station attendants, people like myself and yourself, paying more in tax than the 400 wealthiest families in this country, who pay an effective tax rate of 8.2%. You and I pay well over 30.
Right.
That's wrong. And some may say, well, even at 8%, they're going to pay more and blah, blah, blah than you ever will in your life. Okay, cool. We're talking about percentage of wealth. We're not talking about basic dollars. If we're talking about dollar for dollar, that's the argument of the ignorant.
Yeah.
That's not the argument of those who know that when you have more than you need, it wasn't meant for you. It was for society. If you're Walmart, Amazon, or Google for that matter, well, maybe Google's not the worst. Amazon and Walmart, we'll limit it to those two. And we are, as an American taxpayer, I am subsidizing your workforce through welfare. It is my firm belief that as a federal government, you should be paying that amount of welfare dollars back in a fine at the end of the year. We should not be funding your labor. We should not be paying for your kids or your employees' health benefits. That's on the employer. That's what they wanted under the Republicans. Now, Democrats have been arguing for a Medicare for all system. And the problem with our Democratic friends is they do not hold the other side accountable. They don't know how to stand up firm and push back. I think a lot of us on the Democrat side feel like, oh, I have to be the nice guy. I have to be friendly because we're in this big tent solution where everyone's welcome. Well, damn it, at some point, there's going to be military folks like me, Democrats like me, who are going to push back and say, no, I'm done with this. I'm not going to use your pro life, pro choice language. I'm going to tell you my own arguments. They are pro birth. We support life. I'm not going to go to their language points of we need to fight for ICE and go to a. Hell no. I'm not going to believe that stuff. Show me the warrant. Show me the evidence first. And if you can't do those preliminary steps, why do I have to go any further? And that's kind of another thing, with our government today. They are just not doing the work. They're trying to cut corners and take it easy. And frankly, it's my belief that of all institutions in this world, the United States government should not be the one that's trying to make things more efficient by cutting corners and just seeing something and saying something. A perfect example is when Doge came in and made all their huge cuts. They gutted USAID, completely canceled it. Do you know how many people have died over the last year because of the loss of USAID globally? Nearly 1 million people, 500,000 children died because of our decision to cut USAID, which was feeding malnourished children around the world. 500,000 have died. That's on Marco Rubio's head. That's on Donald Trump's head. That's on Mark Alford's. He supported all this.
Well, that
We
can't
have to
be true.
remind folks of that.
That can't be true. They're pro-life.
Oh, they're pro-life. Yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot. That's why they took food out of malnourished children.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and did an airstrike on a school with little children in it.
Again, lack of
Yeah.
communication, lack of planning, lack of training, lack of coordination, and the fact that you had 17 general officers fired or removed because they wouldn't do this crap with this administration. That should tell you everything. You don't lose 17 GOFOs or general officer flag officers. You don't lose 17 GOFOs over nothing. That also, when we see that amount of change happening within a nation, we call that regime change.
Yeah, I think that happened too in like 1941 when somebody wanted to invade Russia. They were told by several generals not to do it, and they fired them and did it anyway.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if our president or our congressman had ever served a day in their life, but they never did. In fact, Friedrich Trump, Trump's own grandfather, fled Germany, evading military service.
Hmm.
That should tell you everything about that family. They don't care about a flag. They don't care about a nation. They care about money. And frankly, as a Catholic, I don't worship false idols. I don't worship some person. I don't worship a dollar. And what I see with that sort of MAGA movement is it's a cult that puts Mr. Trump as their cult leader and deity like figure who can do no wrong, who's almost treated like he might be a prophet. And then also they worship the dollar more than they do their own faith. And it's unattractive to me.
Yeah, you see that whenever you get on like Track a Pack and you see the donations they get from these different super PACs, and then how their votes have changed over time, and it correlates identical with the amount of money they receive from these PACs.
Right.
That makes a lot of us everyday people pissed, and we're like, "Why are these PACs? This shouldn't be allowed." It's obviously a bribery.
100%. And I think there's two different types of Democrats out there. I'm the Democrat who, yeah, I can tell you I'm not going to take money from political action committees. That's true. I'm not taking money from them. Now, ideological PACs who help veterans get elected, who help Hispanic and LGBT folks get elected, possibly I'll be taking their dollars. I have not had to do it yet. But as a grassroots candidate, I also like to show my work. I'm an attorney. I come with evidence. So go to fec.gov, put in Herrera for Congress, and you can see everybody who's ever donated to me. Everybody. There's not a single PAC donation in there. Now, when it comes to APAC or ADL, the American Defense League, not the Anti Defamation League, I'm talking about the Defense League, which is a war profiteering sort of PAC, or super PACs, which are not named but have just buckets and buckets of money. They're dangerous, because we don't truly know who's pulling the strings. And frankly, a lot of Democrats even said this to me when I said I was going to run. They were like, "You haven't paid your political dues." And I said immediately back to them, "I don't want a career politician. I don't need somebody who's been bought and sold at the local, state, and federal level to the point where I don't know who owns them. Instead, I'd rather vote for somebody like me who's new onto the stage, who's competent, competitive, prepared, and willing to show his work."
Yes, I think there should be more strict term limits on Congress anyway. I feel like everybody gets so
Yes.
focused on the president, they overlook the deep state in a way, and these career politicians and even the war pimps who are defense contractors and even generals and within the intelligence people who've been there for, 30, 40 years. It is concerning who is actually in charge.
Like right now, who's in charge?
Yeah,
Oh man, who the heck knows? It feels like,
we
any
all
day it
know.
feels like it might be Schumer, it might be Hakeem, it might be Booker. But in reality, I kind of look at all three of those characters and I say to myself, like, I wouldn't follow any of you. Not that they're not smart, not that they haven't given their service to their nation, they have, but there's just so much other stuff attached to them at this point. I'm ready for something new. I'm ready for something more transparent, more honest, somebody who speaks sort of like we do, talking about the issues like normal everyday people who do, who gather around the kitchen table and they're focused on how the hell do we provide lunch and dinner and breakfast next week.
Yeah.
I'm used to those conversations. I'm used to being in rooms like today. I went to two separate events today, and I was in Warsaw, Missouri with Mike McCaffrey. He's running for state senate, District 28 here in Missouri. And it was a good meeting. I wanted more people there. I was disappointed that more people didn't show up. But I also have to remind myself this time last year, I was standing up in a room in Blue Springs, and there was maybe about 20 to 30 people in it who were all angry about what was happening. But it was the first time I had stood up and said, I'm going to run for office. And that was in February of 25. And some people were supportive. Other people immediately were like, "You're going to lose. You're not going to win. You're not the right person," whatever. And so I immediately was like, wow, that wasn't expected. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't quit. And I kept telling people, this is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm going to do it. This is who I'm working for. And I've just known my mission from day one. Spoke to it, never left it, never walked away from my mission. It's always been about standing up for working people, single parents, people who have just been marginalized and forgotten about, not dependent on your minority status, although minorities are a part of this. But I think it's really an economic issue today, where you have those who are well off and those who are struggling.
Yeah. It's more of a class war than what they make it out to be.
Right. And I think this idea of the great replacement theory or the silent white majority being forgotten about, all of that the Republican MAGAs have done is take these very real insecurities that people hold on to and they twist them and pervert them and frustrate them to the point where they've twisted the mind of the recipient of the message and now they believe this stuff. I can see where, maybe there's this idea of have the white working class been forgotten about? Because you don't hear that phrase, white working class, among Democrats anymore. And the
Yeah.
thing is, I don't think we have to say it anymore. I think we just mean it. And those who need to hear the label only want to hear the label, I think, because they've heard other labels. And they say to themselves in envy, I don't want them to have it. And that's what I see with this Republican Party is a lot of envy. I don't want them to have it just because I don't want them to have it. Well, why? Because I didn't get it. But you don't need it, whatever this may be. Say it's a welfare benefit. I don't want those Mexican people to have it. Well, why? Because I didn't have it. I had to pull myself up on my own two bootstraps. Well, you actually did have access to it. You just never sought it out. Well, I didn't need it, so they don't need it. That's envy. That's all that
Yeah.
is. And you know, it's just funny. This is also the party about Christian nationalism, and they can't even seem to understand the their own limited arguments are based off of a sin of envy. And you know, when you can talk to these things though, without judgment, and remind folks, here's what works for me. Truly in Missouri, I tell people it's okay. It's okay that you voted for Donald Trump. I'm not mad about that. It's already done. I can't be mad at you for voting the way you voted. It's already happened. All we can do is pick up and move forward. So it's okay that you fell for the world's greatest con man. I tell people that. It's okay. Millions of people did twice, some even three times. It's okay. And when you do that, you give people permission to say, all right, I'm not being judged. He's giving me permission to say it's okay, I made a mistake. What do I want to do moving forward? And more often than not, you see people move away from MAGA. I've had numerous men call me in the middle of the night and yell at me about the Second Amendment or abortion. Not even kidding. And then I tell them where my second job I ever had, I made lead ball shot for black powder rifles. I served in the military for 16 years. I've shot more rifles, more weapon systems than they ever will, and I'm an expert on all of them. But let's go toe to toe and shoot. I'm happy to do it. Love it. It's a favorite pastime of mine. My brothers and I grew up hunting and fishing. So, I mean, it is what it is. You wouldn't believe how many men, as soon as they hear that from a Democrat, are like, whoa, wait, hang on. You actually do this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I sponsor competitive fishing teams in Missouri and hunting teams in Missouri. Then the lights are on, and it's like, hang on, now you're speaking different, Jordan. And that's how I've gotten people on my side, is because I just relate to them. How look, I know how you grew up. My father handed me a shotgun also when I was a teenage boy. It damn near blew my shoulder off, but it was the rite of passage, you know.
Yeah.
It's that moment you get with your uncle, your grandpa, your father, and I think when we find those moments, those memories, and we draw on those and say, that's what I want to bring back. I want you to have those memories with your kids. I want you to be the grandpa in this story now, moving forward. And that also helps Missourians really understand I get your life. I understand what you actually want. You know, I'm not going to bring us on to Identity Hill and talk about that stuff all day. No, we're going to move forward. We're going to do real policy and keep this stuff moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend Paul Venable, he was on the Ike Skelton radio show. I think that's in the Warsaw area, and
Okay.
he was talking about the gross receipts tax. I don't know if you had ever heard about that or not. As far as not, it could be a full replacement, but also a substitute to help alleviate certain like sales tax and income tax. I just don't know if you're familiar with it at all. And
Not on that particular one. No, a gross receipts tax.
yeah, as far it's more a tax like the manufacturing and certain items are taxed in the process as they're made.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so as far as the manufacturer, whoever makes and produces them, whether it's in Missouri, outside of Missouri, or in the whole nation, it's taxed at that level. And then that tax, I think it's like 4 to 6% or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
I guess it's implemented in some parts in Oregon, and it was successful quite a bit. They received a lot more money than what they had anticipated.
Wow.
But I don't know if you heard about that or if it's
You know,
interesting.
I think that's a smart sort of like way to think about maybe some products. Now, we don't really produce an enormous amount. Um, so I would be cautious. I would want to research this for sure
Yeah,
before I ever speak on a policy on it. But like I think there's something to that with one of the things that I was working on and still researching is as we talk about AI and algorithms coming in and replacing jobs, uh, I think it would be a better solution today to start taxing algorithms and AI
right.
as they displace jobs to provide for that economic loss. To me, that seems like the way forward with business practices as opposed to, uh, grossing the or taxing the gross amount of manufactured goods. Now, I could see, maybe that why that might be there and might be good if you're producing, say, like alcohol or tobacco or something that causes a public health issue or something like that. But um, I don't know. I'm pretty pro small business
Yeah,
and American business, so I'd be hesitant to do anything that would affect manufacturing negatively.
yeah. He goes a lot more in depth. I think it's taxliberty.com. I think it's his
Okay.
website where something to that effect. If I get that wrong, he's probably going to be screaming at the TV if he watches this. But yeah, he goes a lot more in depth than what I can about it. And some parts of it you hear it and you're like, yeah, that's actually a good idea. I think it'd be good as like a supplement to help out.
Hmm.
Uh, but I don't know about a full replacement because I am afraid of like a pyramid and then the cost just being burdened onto the consumer.
Yes, and I think like today, as we talk about income tax repeal and tax in general, I've said it, already in this interview that I believe that trickle down burden has happened, and it's the working class today, the labor class today, that really shoulder the burden of our society. What I would be hesitant on is anything that really affects us. I think we are being taxed appropriately at around the 30% mark. I think in our state alone, we are far above the 30% mark
Yeah,
when you factor in all of the other types of taxing that happens here. But by and large across the states, though, I would be focused more on raising taxes on the top 5%, 1% in corporations.
I like it.
I do too. I hope it works. We got to
So,
do it. I like your flag also,
oh,
an
thanks.
appeal to heaven. Yeah.
Yes.
What made you want to
Oh man, I'm glad you asked. So,
get the USS Liberty?
originally I liked the original one from George Washington. I like the backstory. I do
Uh
think it
huh.
kind of appeals to us now a little bit. But then
Sure
I
does.
I got to meet with Bryce Lockwood here in Missouri, and he's
Wonderful guy.
actually yeah. So you've met him?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't. What's his house district? He's running for House District.
It's down in the Springfield area.
It's in the Springfield area. Yeah. I saw him last night, or no, no, no. I was in Marshfield on
Whoops.
Tuesday, I think, and I saw him.
All right. Having some issues, technical difficulties. But yeah, I met him, and I've always been interested in the Liberty, and especially with everything going on with Israel right now. And I did my own deep research with a lot of declassified documents, and I also did an interview with Larry Bowen, who was a survivor on the ship, and it I don't know, it touched me in a way. Like I'm really fascinated with the story, and I feel like as veterans, they were given a really raw deal. You know, they were threatened, blackmailed not to talk about it. They were harassed afterwards, and even now, Congress still won't give them a full investigation or a hearing. And it's they're very
Really?
frustrated. Yeah, and there's a lot of controversy that surrounds it. Uh, so the full story, they were a signal intelligence ship, and they were there to observe the 6 Day war that was going on. And there was a box plane that flew over and was taking surveillance images of the ship, and it was had the Star of David and it was marked Israeli. They waved at it, and it was proven to be identified like 6 hours ahead of time that it was an American ship. They were flying the holiday colors. There was the bigger flag than usual.
Gotcha.
And 6 hours later, I think it was around noon or 1 p.m., unmarked aircraft showed up and attacked the ship, and they torpedoed the ship. killing 34 service members. And Israel's the only country to deliberately attack a U.S. ship without any repercussion. And they have one of the uh, life rafts as a trophy or souvenir, so to speak, in their museum in Israel to this day.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
So,
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
yeah, Larry Bowen did send me an email once he figured out I was talking to you and asked if he could speak with you because he's not getting proper representation in his state. He's not in Missouri. But with you being a veteran,
Absolutely.
yeah, he said he'd love to
Yes.
talk to you. And if you do get elected, maybe get some representation inside Congress.
Absolutely, yeah. Have them reach out. What I like to do is be very accessible to people. I recognize that I am very blessed. I mentioned I started out with a GED. I grew up in very, very terrible violence and poverty. I'm very lucky to be here today. I'm a three-time survivor of suicide brought on by combat trauma and PTSD. Um, a lot of veterans don't get to say these two sentences. I'm here. I'm alive. The fact that I do, sorry,
So you're fine.
the fact that I get to say those sentences still tells me I have a job and it's not done yet. And I have a purpose. And when I do this work, I have to be honest with you, Trenton, like I feel amazing. It feels like I'm doing the right thing, advocating for the vulnerable and the voiceless. And every once in a while I have a moment where I'm like, is this right? And then I'll have like a little bolt of lightning hit me. That story about USS Liberty is one of them. And I'm going to read this for you. I think you'll find it interesting. Um, as we're talking through this conversation, it reminds me that at the birth of this nation, we fled tyranny. We fled a king that refused to see us as people. And today, I believe firmly that we are under a similar presidency that refuses to see people who disagree with him politically as people. And our founding fathers, 250 years ago, in the Declaration of Independence, wrote down 27 grievances against the king. And about 24 out of 27 align with this president. But I want to read just a few of them for you. 250 years ago, our founding fathers wrote down what tyranny looks like. These are the 27 grievances, or at least in part. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent and superior to the civilian power. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us without our local consent. For protecting them through mock trial for the murders which they should commit. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world through sweeping tariffs and economic decrees imposed without representation. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of a trial by jury. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in only the most humble of terms. And our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be a ruler of free people. That's in our Declaration of Independence. Firmly, that describes our current president, what we're feeling and seeing underneath this ICE regime, the fact that he's sending veterans to foreign nations under the presumption that they were here illegally. I mean, tariffs globally. I mean, he has to repay nearly $300 billion back to Americans who paid those tariffs. $300 billion. You think they're ever going to get it back? I
No.
doubt it. I believe we're at the right time and place in our American history to see a rebirth of our nation. And after 250 years, I think we're ready to get it right for the next quarter millennia.
Well, if you don't get goosebumps when you read that, I don't know what to tell you.
Honestly, when I saw that was a God moment when I saw that 27 grievances, and I was like, man, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing
Yeah.
it. Thank you for the motivation that I needed. But when I look at stuff like that, I'm reminded constantly of no, I'm doing the right thing. I am following in our founders' footsteps. I know I am doing the right thing. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you uh, doing this, and I hope we could do more if you have the time. I know you're an extremely busy person.
I do. I do have the time. I'm happy to come back anytime. We'll just have to work it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, let me know if there's anything also you'd like me to come back and speak on specifically, whether it's gerrymandering, gun rights, restoration of firearm rights, which is something I advocate for at the federal level.
Yeah.
I also advocate for voting rights restoration as well. Whoa, we can have those conversations later.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you because it's just so much. I feel I don't want to shortchange people, and especially you trying to squeeze it all into one. So,
No problem.
all right. Is there anything you like to add?
I would just say over the last 14 months of traveling all across Missouri, I've been in Democrat kitchens, I've been in Republican living rooms, I've been in libertarian barbecues. I've been everywhere. I'll talk to anybody. No idea is off the table. That doesn't mean I'm going to fight for every idea. I'm just meaning I'm willing to listen to everybody without judgment. And that's what you should expect, right? One thing I've noticed on this campaign trail is most folks have never seen or heard from a candidate in their lives, but they all know who their congressman is, or at least one of the congressmen in our state, who they are, but they've never met the person or maybe even spoken to the person. One of the things that I hope to change is bring back the politics of Jimmy Carter. I write a personal handwritten letter to everybody who donates more than $100. If you come into my office, I'm going to buy you a cup of coffee. We're going to have a conversation. If you want to call me, go to my campaign website. My phone number is on there. It's 816-287-2326. I'm the only one who answers that phone line. Call me anytime, and I truly do mean it. I was a master sergeant for years. I'm used to my airmen calling me at 3 in the morning and saying, "Hey, Sergeant Herrera, I did something dumb." It's just you get used to it.
Yeah.
So I'm used to it. I'd rather have a let's have a conversation than rather than I did something dumb talk anytime at 3 in the morning. So and I would say this, out of the candidates who are running, Republican, Libertarian, or Democrat, I am the only candidate with combat service. I am the only candidate with constitutional law experience. This election matters because competence matters. This will be the most consequential election of our lifetime. If we do not elect Democrats to install the check and balance against this president during the midterms this year, I don't know what our government will look like in 2 years. I really don't.
Yep.
This is an important election. And I will say, like, one last little note, we saw some huge results on April 7th all across the state. That's awesome. But in the fourth congressional district last election cycle during 2024, it was the couch that won. The couch received 208,000 votes. Mark Alford only received 196,000. So I know where the votes are. We just got to get people off of the couch and into the ballot box. And it's possible. Go to jordanjherrera.com to learn more about me, to buy a yard sign, a t shirt, a baseball cap, or to stop by the office and have a cup of coffee anytime.